They told us mercy was weakness, that compassion had no place in war, that the only way to survive was to harden, to kill, to become the monster we feared. But that was before a single medic broke the rules, walked into a cell meant for vengeance, and touched the enemy everyone called unhealable. What happened next didn't just change the war. It changed what it meant to be human. This is the story of Keith Mercer, the man who healed the alien queen who destroyed his world, and the 5 words that silenced 11 years of blood. I was just cleaning her wound, until she grabbed my wrist and said, "Do that again." War had a scent, not the sterile tang of gunmetal, not the acrid sting of ozone after a plasma strike. Real war smelled of fear, sweat, oil, blood, and the quiet rot that came when the screaming stopped. Keith Mercer knew that scent better than he knew his own reflection. He'd carried it since the Titan Colony massacre, a nightmare burned into memory and bone. He'd been 28 then, a combat medic stationed on Titan's medical ring. When the Zathan fleet broke orbit, the alarms screamed like dying things. Then came the bombardment. Plasma fire swept across the colony's glass domes, turning them into molten rivers. Every laugh, every familiar face, every heartbeat he'd called home, gone. He remembered dragging bodies through corridors filled with choking dust, patching wounds until his arms gave out, listening to the endless chorus of dying breaths, until even mercy felt like a sin. When the Alliance finally pulled survivors off the surface, Keith swore 2 oaths, one to the uniform that saved him, and one to himself, that he would never stop healing what war had broken, even if it meant healing the monsters who'd caused the breaking. That second oath was the one that would damn him. Years passed. The war with the Zathan dragged on. 11 long years of attrition and ash. Humanity adapted, hardened. Every victory came with a little less soul attached. Prisoners disappeared from triage lists. The phrase acceptable loss became standard. Mercy was a word for fools. Keith didn't believe that. He couldn't. So when command ordered him to abandon the wounded Zathan queen captured on Obsidian Outpost, he broke the chain of command without hesitation. They called the Zathan monsters. 9 feet tall, insectoid armor, for bladed arms, born and bred for conquest. And she, their queen, was the worst of them all. Vera of the High Brood, the architect of Titan's destruction. Alliance command wanted her alive only long enough for a public trial. But when her dropship crashed and she was pulled from the wreckage, barely clinging to life, they changed their tune. No aid, no mercy. Let infection finish the job. Keith looked at her medical readout, saw the infection crawling through her thorax, and made his choice. He suited up, grabbed his medkit, and walked into the containment bay alone. The air was freezing, colder than any human space needed to be. Copper, ozone, the faint hum of containment fields. Every instinct screamed, leave. Through the frost glass barrier, he saw her. Vera, chained, massive, wings scorched and broken. Her golden eyes burned even in the dim light. Judith's voice crackled in his ear. His commanding officer, his friend, maybe something more if war hadn't burned away the maybes. Keith, command said to leave her. She's a war criminal. His reply came steady. She's a prisoner of war. There's a difference. He stepped through the hatch. The door sealed behind him with a hiss that sounded far too final. She turned her head toward him. Her voice was a metallic whisper, half growl, half laugh. Human physician. Come to gloat? To watch the mighty fall. He swallowed. I came to do my job. She bared her fangs in something like amusement. You would heal me? After Titan. He didn't answer. He just knelt beside her, pulled open his medkit, and began cleaning the wound that had nearly killed her. The recording drones caught everything. The silence, the tension, the way his hands trembled but never stopped moving. When he pressed a sterilizer pad to her scorched flesh, she hissed. A low, sharp sound that made every hair on his neck rise. Then it happened. Her clawed hand shot out, lightning fast, and clamped around his wrist. He froze. Her grip could have snapped bone like glass. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, in a voice barely more than a whisper, she said, "Do that again." The medic blinked. What? Her golden eyes met his. Your touch. It lessens the pain. He stared at her. The queen who had destroyed his home, asking for comfort. And for the first time in years, Keith Mercer felt something break loose inside his chest. Compassion. Damn it all. Compassion. The footage would go viral within hours. But in that moment, there was only silence. Only the sound of his heartbeat. And the alien queen's breathing, slow, steady, alive. And somewhere deep in that frozen bay, a war that had lasted 11 years, shifted. The next time Keith entered the containment bay, the air felt different. Still cold. Still heavy. But the silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was curious. The queen's wound was closing, slowly, unevenly, but closing. The purple-black veins that had pulsed with infection were turning silver where the medicine took hold. Keith adjusted the sterilizer pad, checking vitals on his wrist display. She watched every motion with those molten eyes. "You come back," she said finally. "Why?" He didn't look up. "Because you're still alive." Her claws scraped against the metal floor. "Pity. Duty," he replied. "You're my patient." She studied him. Her voice was quieter when she asked, "Even after Titan?" That name hit like a hammer to the ribs. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. He just said, "Especially after Titan." For the first time, the queen didn't have an answer. Days passed. He kept returning. Each visit, the drones recorded everything. Their words, their silences, their strange, careful rhythm. Once, as he replaced her bandages, he caught her watching his hands. "You heal with such care," she said. "Among my kind, pain is strength. We tear our wounds open to remember we survived." Keith pressed another patch into place. "That's not strength," he said softly. "That's scar worship." Her wings shifted, an alien gesture of uncertainty. "Scar worship," she repeated, tasting the phrase like it was dangerous. "Perhaps. But without pain, we forget who we are." He paused, then looked up at her. "Maybe without compassion, we forget what we could be." The words hung there. Between them. Between species. Between centuries of war. She didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, she asked, "What is compassion?" He blinked. "You don't have a word for it?" "No." Her voice was almost a whisper. "We have words for hunger, for conquest, for the urge to devour. But not that." He set down the medkit and met her gaze. "Compassion is when you take care of someone even if it costs you. Even when it makes no sense." Something shifted in her expression, subtle, almost imperceptible. Not fear, not anger, recognition. The recording of that exchange would later light up half the galaxy. Comment feeds filled with translations, analyses, endless arguments about what humanity had done or what she had said. Some called it propaganda. Others called it proof. But in that cold chamber, none of that mattered. She asked questions now. About humanity. About emotion. About mercy. And Keith answered every one. He told her about Titan. About the nights he woke to the smell of burning glass. About the oath he'd made to never stop healing. And when he finished, she said only, "My kind would have killed you for such weakness." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we're still fighting." Then came the third visit. The wound had almost closed. He was cleaning the last of the infection when she caught his wrist again. The same way she had the first day. This time, there was no thread in it. Only something fragile. Something alive. Her voice was barely audible. "When you touched me, I did not feel pain. I felt quiet." He said, "That's what healing feels like." Her claws loosened. "Do that again." The phrase that started the legend. The line that would echo across star systems. He did. Slow, careful, gentle. For the first time in Zathan history, a queen purred. The sound was strange, low and thrumming. Half mechanical, half animal, entirely alive. And the cameras caught it all. That sound, one soft vibration in a room meant for violence, would become the most replayed clip in human history. Millions watched the footage and felt something they hadn't felt in years. Hope. The war machine paused. Just slightly. Enough for the world to remember there were other ways to fight. And Keith Mercer? He didn't think about cameras. He didn't think about politics or history. He just looked at her and whispered, "You're going to live." And for the first time, the Queen of the Zathans said softly, "Then perhaps, so will we." The footage hit the net like a pulse of lightning. First, a few shaky re-uploads from low-security feeds. Then the viral explosion, millions of eyes watching the impossible. A human medic kneeling beside an alien queen, her claws around his wrist. Her voice, translated across 1,000 languages. "Do that again." Some called it fake. Others called it heresy. But the image spread faster than the censors could stop it. On the human frontier worlds, people watched in stunned silence. On Zathan hives, soldiers paused mid-ration to replay the sound of their queen's purr. No one knew what it meant, but everyone felt it. Command called it a disaster. Mercer, you compromised a war criminal. You've given the enemy propaganda. They stripped his rank, grounded his unit, confined him to medical quarters pending inquiry. Judith came to see him that night, eyes tired, voice low. You broke protocol, Keith. You made her human. He looked up from the datapad, showing the footage looped endlessly. She was never less than that. Judith sighed. They're calling you the healer of enemies. Do you know how that sounds in a war this bloody? Keith smiled faintly, like the first honest thing anyone said in years. Outside, the war didn't stop, but something changed in the tone of the broadcasts. On both sides, the word compassion began to appear, first as mockery, then as curiosity. Inside her cell, Queen Vera healed. When Keith was reinstated to medical observation, under surveillance, of course, he found her waiting for him, no longer bound by pain, but still chained by policy. You risked much for me, she said. He answered, you were dying. That's reason enough. Her eyes flickered with alien emotion. My kind would call that weakness. Mine would call it strength. Her wings unfolded slightly, catching the dim blue light. In my brood, we teach that mercy invites death. Keith shook his head. Mercy invites life. They spoke for hours. About survival. About meaning. About what it costs to keep killing. One day, she asked him something new. Why do you fight? He hesitated. At first, revenge. After Titan, I wanted blood. But revenge doesn't rebuild anything. It just burns slower. And now I fight to keep us from forgetting we're worth saving. She went silent for a long time, then said softly, perhaps strength is not in the killing blow, but in the hand that heals. That phrase, recorded, translated, shared, became the heartbeat of a movement. They called it the Mercer Principle, an idea so dangerous it terrified generals, an idea so beautiful it stopped riots. Judith confronted him again weeks later. Keith, they're saying the Queen's quoting you, that she's asking to speak to the Alliance directly. She can barely stand, Keith said. She's changing the war. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had pressed bandages, cleaned wounds, broken orders. I didn't mean to change anything. I just couldn't watch someone die when I could help. Judith's voice cracked. You don't get it. You made her see us differently. Keith looked up. No, Judith. I made her see that we were the same. By then, Zathan soldiers had begun refusing to execute prisoners. Human Marines were recording videos quoting the Queen's words. Peace felt impossible. And yet, for the first time, it didn't feel absurd. Queen Vera's infection had cleared completely. Her body was whole again, but something deeper had healed too. When she looked at Keith, she didn't see prey or foe. She saw a reflection she didn't know her species could make. And Keith, the medic who had lost everything on Titan, saw in her eyes the faintest spark of redemption. He realized then that the galaxy might not end in fire. It might end in understanding. But understanding, like healing, comes at a price. Peace is never born cleanly. It claws its way out through blood and fear. By the time the Mercer Principle had spread across the networks, the Alliance was splintering. Half the fleet wanted to silence Keith Mercer permanently. The other half wanted to make him a saint. Keith wanted neither. He just wanted the killing to stop. When the summons came for the disciplinary tribunal, he didn't resist. He walked into the steel-lit chamber in his medic's blacks, eyes steady, hands still scarred from the Queen's wound dressings. The tribunal chair, Admiral Corinne, leaned forward. You defied direct orders. You treated an enemy asset. You caused unrest across 5 sectors. Keith said nothing. Do you deny any of it? He looked up. No, sir. I healed someone who was dying. The Admiral's tone sharpened. A monster who murdered millions. Keith's voice didn't rise. She bled. She hurt. She asked for help. That's all I needed to know. Silence spread across the chamber. Someone in the back whispered. He sounds like he believes it. They confined him to quarters again, awaiting sentence. But while politicians debated his punishment, the Zathan Queen was making her own moves. Across the void, Queen Vera broke communication silence for the first time since her capture. The broadcast was short. Your medic showed me mercy. I return it. The image cut to the release of human prisoners on a Zathan warship, alive, unharmed. The footage shattered the feeds again. Alliance Command couldn't contain it. Protests erupted on both sides. Peace marches on Mars. Hive chants in Zathan tunnels. A single phrase echoed through every transmission. He showed me the strength of mercy. Judith smuggled herself into Keith's quarters that night. Her eyes were red. Her voice was a whisper. They're going to execute you, Keith. They think killing you will kill the idea. He smiled faintly. Ideas don't die that easy. She grabbed his arm. Then run. I can get you off station. The Queen's envoy wants to meet. He hesitated. If I run, they'll call me a traitor. They already do. Hours later, alarms blared again. Just like Titan. Just like the night he'd first lost everything. But this time, the chaos was for him. He and Judith ran through smoke-filled corridors toward the shuttle bay. Over the comms, the Queen's voice echoed in broken translation. Medic Mercer, come. Her envoy ship hung outside the docking ring, black and glimmering with alien biometal. They boarded seconds before the Alliance blockade arrived. The Queen herself was waiting, unchained, unmasked, alive. When she saw him, she bowed her massive head, a gesture no Zathan had ever offered a human. Her voice thrummed low and resonant. You healed my wound. Now I heal yours. He stared at her, exhausted, stunned. You'll start another war by taking me. She tilted her head. Then let them come. Perhaps they will learn what mercy looks like up close. Judith stepped forward. We didn't come for asylum. We came for peace. The Queen's eyes softened. Then you came for truth. In the days that followed, the three of them, the medic, the Queen, and the soldier, hid in the cold dark between stars, drafting words that could end a war. It wasn't easy. Every paragraph felt like a wound reopening. But Keith knew something now that neither side could unsee. He had touched the enemy and felt humanity staring back. The proposal they wrote would become the foundation for the first peace accords. Two simple principles. That compassion is not surrender. That healing is strength. They transmitted it to both governments, knowing it could mean their deaths. The response came swift and brutal. A fleet from both sides converging on their position. Judith looked at Keith, her hand gripping his shoulder. They're not coming to talk. Keith smiled sadly. They don't have to. They've already heard us. The Queen stepped forward, towering above them both. Then we make them see. Her claws danced across the ship's console. Broadcast uplink. Galaxy-wide channel. Every planet, every fleet, every soldier received the same live feed. A human and a Zathan standing side by side. Keith's voice was calm. War teaches us how to hate, but only mercy teaches us how to live. Vera's voice followed, deep and certain. The one who healed me showed me a strength beyond conquest. I choose that strength now. The feed cut to black. For one heartbeat, the galaxy held its breath. Then the firing stopped. The gun stayed silent longer than anyone expected. Minutes stretched into hours, hours into days. Across the galaxy, fleets held their positions, waiting for someone, anyone, to fire the first shot. No one did. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was the first quiet the galaxy had heard in 11 years. The broadcast had done what 1,000 fleets couldn't. It had reminded both species that mercy existed, and that it could be stronger than fear. The tribunal was dissolved. The charges against Keith Mercer vanished under political pressure and public fury. The Alliance couldn't make a martyr out of him now. He was already something else. The Zathan called him the healer of enemies. Humans called him the medic of Titan. To Keith, those names felt too heavy. He didn't want statues or stories. He just wanted the dying to stop. When the first peace summit began, Queen Vera attended in person, not in chains, but in regal armor polished to a mirror sheen. She stood before the gathered delegates and said the words that would define an age. He showed me the strength of mercy. Keith sat at the edge of the chamber, anonymous among the aides and medics. But when she said it, every head turned toward him. For a moment, he wished he could disappear. But instead, he stood and bowed his head. No applause followed, just silence. And then, one by one, both species began to lower their weapons. Peace didn't come overnight. It came in fragments, hesitant truces, bitter negotiations. Slow forgiveness traded like fragile glass. But it came. And when it did, Keith didn't join the new government. He didn't seek command. He went back to what he'd always done. He healed. He trained medics from both species, teaching them how to save lives without asking who deserved it. He taught them to see enemies as patients, not targets. And when recruits asked him what drove him, he would tell them the same thing every time. Because every wound we close makes the next war harder to start. Years passed. The war became a memory told in classrooms. Its horrors softened by time. Its heroes simplified into stories. Keith Mercer aged quietly. Judith stayed by his side, never letting him forget that compassion had a cost worth paying. When he finally died on Mars, she scattered his ashes over Titan's rebuilt domes, the place where it had all begun. The message she played at his memorial was simple. He didn't fight to win. He fought to remind us who we are. Centuries later, the footage still plays in museums and lecture halls. A grainy image of a man in a medsuit kneeling beside a monstrous alien. His hands steady, his eyes calm, her claws wrapped around his wrist. Her voice, half metallic, half trembling, whispering, "Do that again." Children study the translation etched beneath the image. True strength is not in the killing blow. It is in the hand that heals when it could harm. On the rebuilt Titan monolith, the words shimmer under starlight. The Mercer principle. Every generation watches the clip and feels something old and fierce awaken. The reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, humanity's greatest weapon was never its power to destroy. It was its power to care. If this story made your chest tighten, if it reminded you that compassion still matters, then don't scroll past it. Share it, because somewhere out there, someone's fighting their own war. And maybe they just need to remember that strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how gently you can still hold on. In every timeline, in every galaxy, there's a Keith Mercer choosing to heal instead of hate. Be that person, because the wars we stop with mercy are the ones that save us all.